of Plain Talk here on the White Pages podcast. I am here with Ronald R.J. Reid, a practicing psychotherapist, good friend of mine, and I would give you the title of amateur philosopher, but that's up to you if you agree with me on that.
Don't be so bold.
And just in my experience, and philosophy is the main thing that we talk around here. So, figure we should at least keep things semi-consistent. How are you, sir?
Very well indeed. Interesting times that we have, but doing well, thank you.
Interesting times indeed. We were just talking before the show started about the changing demographics of your practice over the last couple of months.
Yes. So I've live right here in Maine, just so you know, just outside of Portland, and I've for the last how long have I had that house? Year actually had a home practice, and coinciding with a similar pattern with the pandemic and Black Lives Matters. So the impact of those two things have changed the demographics of my practice, clients that come in. Normally, living in Maine, and just for those people who don't know me, I'm a Black Brit, Afro-Caribbean, born and raised in London, England, if you can't tell by my accent. But I'm first generation Black British, but have lived here now, going on 20 years now. So I immigrated and come here. Just a little background. So living in Maine and in Portland, there's not many Black people. And also, what I find is when I say Black people, I just mean anyone with pigment in their skin. But Black people in America, and same in England, they just don't go to therapists. Fear, untrusting, a lot of stuff around that is historic. Very, very, very paramount in America as well. So you really notice that. But what I noticed this year with the existential shift in social consciousness around race, around subjugation, around racial abuse, and also the police. A lot of Black people, many Black people, have come out of the woodwork and seeking therapy to kind of process what's going on for them. So what I found is my practice is swollen. With its demographics to over half of my practice is people of colour, so very interesting because that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, well,
at least not in Maine anyway.
Yeah, Maine, the whitest and oldest state in the union. I think we're 97% white, something crazy, like really up there.
Really up there.
And interestingly, with the pandemic. The last statistic I heard about infection rates among Mainers is that the Black population bore the brunt of it with something like 25% of coronavirus infections, despite, again, being like 2% of the population.
Yeah.
So I can understand why they might feel a little upset and need someone to talk to.
Right.
Unfortunate for the mass psychology of the community, but good for your practice, I suppose.
Yeah. As a psychotherapist, it's brilliant because my pursuit is the enlightenment and the growth of the individual to be the best person that they can, whatever the situation, and everybody is open to that, right? So it doesn't have to be just middle class white people that do that, but also anyone else that might want to seek that enlightenment.
You have described your practice as humanistic. Can you define that for me?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm a humanistic practitioner. So it's a model. The author, the creator, Carl Rogers, really kind of moving out of that Freudian, neo-Freudian idea of practitioner and client, or patient as they would say. Really wanted to kind of delve in deeper and get to know the client as a practitioner, but also to empower. That's really about the 60s, was really about a lot of new models came out. It was really about giving the power back to the client. So humanistic psychology really looks at the whole human, the whole person, rather than just a diagnosis, depression or anxiety or whatever it might be. You kind of look at the whole person. My particular practice, the way that I do that, equally is, as well as looking at the whole person, doesn't mean that the thing that you came to see me isn't important, but you are the persons that are going to figure it out. So all the other parts of you are going to figure out how you're going to navigate the thing that's holding you back or the thing that's weighing on you. Another thing I like to say about my practice, or I like to say to clients, is I transcend our diversity. So as a black man in my 50s now, working here, it's a challenge to sit equally with your clients. Many reasons, we can go really deep into this one, but many reasons why that is. And previous models, different types of models, do not take into consideration the cultural aspect of the person. Right? It doesn't address really the binary choice, if non-binary choice of the person as well, how they see themselves as a person. So what the humanistic model tries to do, at least the way I practice, is that we look at the person, we transcend our differences to look at the person. And so that allows both you, the client, and myself to come from an equal position. Yes, I have knowledge, but the point is really that let's share our knowledge and I'll mirror what's happening with you. So the biggest part for me, why I picked that one, was race and equality. So a lot of other models didn't really address that, and humanistic approach in this indirect way kind of addressed that. And one last thing, you may have heard this one. There's a saying in humanistic psychology, which is unconditional positive regard. So what that means is that I accept you for who you are. Right? So you might come in here and be angry. You might come in here and feel ashamed or have to face something. And my role is to accept you for who you are, so that we can sit in it and work through what just happened, why you're feeling that way, to process through that without judgment and without heavy blame. Right. So, in a synopsis, there's a lot more to that, but in a synopsis, that's
I think it's a great synopsis.
Well, thank you, sir.
And so, you're a black Brit from London who emigrated to the United States. Why did you want to be a therapist, a psychologist? What drew you to that?
Yeah, what drew this to? Yes. I was just talking to a 22-year-old black man just today, actually, this afternoon, and I was talking about pursuit, right? And particularly talking to a black man, and to me, a young lad, and he was a lot of fire and brimstone, a lot of kind of almost black and white thinking, remembering that he's getting in touch with his personality and his anger around what's going on this year. And also we use the word nomadic, so I would say the same for myself. We kind of, at that age, you're not quite sure where you're going. And what I was saying to him is that I realized in my life that I'm a people person. When I interact with people, I seem to feel good. And so as a young 22-year-old, you don't know what you're going to do with that. You just go, oh, I like that. I equally recognize that I learn a lot from people. If I sit with people, then there's a symbiotic kind of communication that goes on. Whether it's verbal or whether it's non-verbal, there's always this communication that's going on. And I was very fascinated by that. And really, I worked with adjudicated youth in Arizona, New York, Pennsylvania. So I worked with adjudicated youth, very tough, an awakening for a London boy. I might be tough, but all those boys were tough. So that was like, I had to learn about boundaries and structure and how to hold your own personhood. Really had to learn that. But but there was a real kind of connection of learning of what it is to be an American youth, particularly if you're of colour. So I liked it. I liked the outdoors. So it was a good combination to work with kids outdoors, right? It was my strength. Pursuing that right through to probably mid-30s, I kind of realised that I'm not going to be able to keep up with these 17, 18, 19-year-olds anymore. And once you slip on that, then it's a downward slope. So kind of coming back, and I was recognizing that, well, what's the next thing I can do? I can't march around the mountains with them, but I can get them in a room and sit down and talk. And so initially I tried, doing, what would you call that? BHP, behavioral health therapy. So I was the therapist, and I was the person that kind of implemented. Went into your home, kind of went into people's homes, looked after usually it was an adolescent kid, and did the things that the clinician kind of wrote down as a treatment plan, right? So that was I did that for a few years to get the feel. And then I realised, right, I can hack it. Of course, kids in Maine are not as tough, sorry kids, as tough as the ones in New York. So it was actually kind of like a breath of fresh air for me once I did that and then come back to this. And my next step for that was going back to school. And so very scary. I'm not an academic as in the traditional sense. I do see myself as a kind of intellectual, but I wouldn't say I'm an academic. That structure of education is not necessarily my forte. But I really loved my grad program. It worked my face off, and I recognized how intellectual conversations with another human being is so fascinating for me. And so from probably my first year of grad program, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done, but first year I just knew this is where I was going. So I did a lot of work. Firstly, after grad, I worked at Dartmouth for a year. Hated it. Oh my God, the structuralization and the systemization of that system just does not fit with me. I am an organic being, and that's how I like to practice, and they were so structured. And it was so sad to see students of color in an Ivy League trying to find their own feet. And I was young, so it just really fired up in me that way. So I did that for about a year and a bit, and then came back and did community-based stuff, residential stuff, and really feeling out all different aspects of psychotherapy, and moved towards doing much more kind of one-on-one or family-orientated, where I could sit and interact with a client and their introspectiveness of themselves. And so that's really that kind of moved me in that direction. And grad program really taught me about the humanistic psychology. So I kind of moved over into that sort of place. Lots of stories about, not even about clients, but hard times of trying to practice the way that you want to practice in a place like Maine, especially when you're a black Londoner. So I'm an extrovert. So you need to talk with sense, or I'm going to just say, what are you talking about, right? Because I'm not going to just play along because you're the boss, right? So I think I challenge a little bit because I'm a strong personality. So I challenge people, and I think that's what we're supposed to do. But a lot of people don't. They follow along, right? So a lot of kind of moving around in different places to try and find the right fit. And what I found was when I could be my own boss and practice the way that I wanted to practice, I got better results, right? And both ways. I felt good about the things I was doing, and for the most part, so did the clients. So that's really what kind of got me into that, and loving sitting down and talking with people. I want to just put this point out. The beautiful thing, for the therapist's point of view, the beautiful thing about doing psychotherapy, sitting down, is that it's the most truest, the most transparent, the most honest conversation you can have with another human being. And very rarely do we actually have that. Right? We don't sit down and just be very open with somebody and just talk about whatever the subject matter is in that frank way and stay in it even when it's uncomfortable. No, very few places that we do that. Families don't do that. So it's to me, that's the pinnacle. That's the beauty of being able to do that type of therapy, is that it's real, right? You know, it's not fake. It's real, and that's the piece that I love, the most. Yeah.
Why Maine?
Why Maine? What a good question. It's actually quite a short one. Back in the day, we're talking 20 years ago, I was married. And so when I was in Arizona, I worked at, what was the place called? I cannot remember, what was it? Oh, I can't remember the name of it now. I was lost me. It'll come back to me. But it was basically adjudicated youth, residential adjudicated youth. And she was there as well. So her family was initially from Massachusetts, but they moved to Maine. So doing the whole immigrations thing, as we were going to marriage, I had to go home, be there for a year, do all the paperwork, then come back on a particular visa, and that's where she goes, this is where we're living. So I was like, okay then, and I really had to look up Maine. Sorry, Maine, but I really didn't know where it was, and so I had to look it up to find out where is Maine. So that's my introduction to Maine. It's interesting.
Just a complete coincidence, really.
Yeah. It was almost going to be Vermont. And of course, now I know the demographics, the economics of each state. But to me, I'm an outdoors person. So Vermont is about outdoors and beautiful, right? Not about like, oh yeah, it's even whiter than Maine. You know? Yeah,
it is.
Even whiter than Maine. So there's a lot of challenges to that. Just want to highlight. There's a lot of challenges to that being a outspoken black person with an English accent. There's a side of it that people love it and they're intrigued by it, but there's also the other side where people can be very threatened by it as well, you know. And really, it's just about their own personhood, right, and what they're projecting onto me, right, because I highlight something in them. So going off on a little tangent, but interesting.
Tangents are great. That's what podcasts are for. I do have to say, I'm glad you picked Maine over Vermont. There's no way we would have met otherwise.
Right. Yeah.
My aunt was your professor in grad school.
Yes, one of the professors that I had. Yeah. Very interesting. Maine, you gotta love Maine. Remember, I come from London, right? So last count, I think we're in the 14 to 15 million people.
Just about,
yeah. Right, just right there, okay? So it's so interesting to be in Maine, and I think everyone's like 2 degrees of separation.
Just about.
Yeah.
3 at most.
Right.
But especially if you have established family here, then it's everyone's within 1 degree of each other.
Right. Amazing.
It's unique in these sort of small state areas, and especially like it is a small state, but you forget that it is, you know, like I think it's like the 24th or 25th largest by land area.
I thought so. It's big.
It's quite a large state that has no one in it.
Right.
There's no one here. We're all spread out. You know, and I talked to I don't know if you experienced this coming over, but I talked to some of my because I know people across the pond, and I talk to them about like the sizes of places and like driving distances. You know, I'll say something like, "Oh yeah, traveled 3 hours up and back to go up to Acadia," and they're like, "That's like a week trip. What do you mean you did that in a day?"
Right.
It's a 3-hour trip. That's nothing. You know.
Yeah. You're so right. I the distances. So geographically, Maine is bigger than England.
Really?
Yeah, just to put into perspective about the size of things. So when we drive from London to Liverpool, it's like an hour and a half, right? And we're like, oh my God, that's such a long time. So when you come here and you got to do, it's 2 hours just to get out of the state to Boston. Right?
Yeah.
And that's from Portland. So if you live anywhere else, and then it's more time to go up country. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable that it takes you that long. So yes, I would say that learning distances, having a bloody good car that can get up to that speed and then keep going. You really need it. Never had a car in England, London, right?
You don't need a car in London.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have a car in London.
You really
that's
shouldn't.
That's a bad idea.
Yeah. More work than it's worth.
So you came to America because sounds like you met someone. And
Well, it's interesting. I stayed in America because of that. I came to America for, in a way, kind of opportunity. So you're leading into this, but the great immigrant story. And I kind of want to put this out here a little bit. Any immigrant who's become naturalized or will become naturalized really see great opportunity here for themselves and what America stands for, right? As a icon of liberty and the pursuit of happiness, right? So many people that come from away and born in other countries, when they come here, they're so fired up to make a success of their life, and the feeling of opportunity. So I love England. Don't get me wrong. I like the culture of England. I like the style. I like the way that they pursue life. Let alone Brexit. We'll leave that alone. but that's just that's like a hand grenade in everything right now. But there is a real homogeneous feel to being a Brit, right? But the issue that I find as a working class lad, first generation, is that there is a lack of opportunity. It's really hard to break out and do your own thing. And maybe some people say, no, it's easy, you can do that if you want to. But where I came from, North London, Wood Green, Tottenham area, there wasn't much. Before I travelled, I think I was did construction. I was in the army, right? I left school with nothing. I flunked school and just left school with nothing, and there wasn't much going for me, right? Mm-hmm. The coming to America was this adventure. You have wonderful wilderness, and it's wild. There's very few places in England, maybe Scotland, maybe parts of Wales, but I would even say no to that are wild anymore. And it's beautiful, but it's not wild. So just one thing, you have this beautiful wilderness that you have across America. So for a wilderness person, outdoors person, that's like, wow, what a pursuit. The opportunity to take a different direction in my career, right, to pursue being a people person. So getting a job and finding out about America and just like, okay. And then the other part of that is a lot of Brits have at least when I was growing up, have a love-hate relationship with America. So there is this shiny, everything's perfect kind of image that is portrayed to the world. But so that it's almost like, well, no one's like that, right? Right. But there's also, so that's the bit that you're like, oh my god, I can't stand them. They're so showy, right? And I'm sorry, Americans. As a Brit, I'm loud, but oh my word, when Americans go anywhere, everybody knows where they are, right? And the underground, the subway, the middle of London, you know where the Americans are. And so there's something about that bravado. So that's the one side of the image. But the other side is this freedom and this possibility. It's not that, oh, we hand things to you. It's the feeling that the barriers have been taken away. As a working class man, black man, and I keep saying that, but it's a factor because it's all about class in England. So other countries probably have something like that, caste system if you're in India, but it's class. And class is not about money, it's about birthright. Right, so when you're working class, it's because your parents are working class. So that's most of Europe is like that. So we've moved away from that turn of the century, but that's the concept of working class. Middle class is affluent. Usually in England, it's about education. So if you've had a higher education, which was when I was growing up quite exclusive, so people of colour didn't go into higher education when I was there, maybe 2%. You're right, wasn't that
Wow.
much? Yeah, and I went to Sussex University, so look it up. It's like the second London, and they still didn't have that many black people. So kind of used to it, isn't it? I see you in these places where I'm like the only one, or one of few. I don't know why I'm doing that. Sucker for punishment, I guess. But the pursuit of adventure. But coming here, I suppose, it's the chance to create yourself again. I think that's the pursuit. So for me, it was just about class oppression. For other people, it could be because of fear of oppression of who you are because of race, because of socioeconomic standing, because of political ideology. And so coming to America for us as immigrants coming over is a chance to start again. And in any direction that you want, providing you're willing to work at it. And I think that's the overriding kind of ideology about America, is that concept that you can go for whatever you want, providing you're willing to work for it. So whether that's true or not, that's something else, but that's the concept that you have. So for me, that's what brought me over. The adventure and the possibility of doing something different.
Do you think it's still true?
I think no. Well, tell a lie. Yes, in everyday Americanism. I live in Maine. I live mainly in Portland. I've been up and down, and providing I present the thing that thing wants. So, as a therapist, what they're looking for is somebody who knows what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. They might be a little challenged or fearful of me because, oh my God, there's this person who's from away and doesn't look like me. But if I can transcend that and connect, right, and show you that I'm the person that you're looking for, then bam, you can grow a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really about finding what your thing is. That you can sell, for a choice of a better word, that somebody else may want, mm-hmm. right? So yes, but I think it's drastically harder now, particularly the starting, because there is no network in America. There's a very weak network of support in America. So a lot of places, unless it's a developing countries, have some system that looks after their citizens. So you can go to the hospital, you can get food, you can get shelter, right? Your children can be looked after. In this country, you just about can do that, and it falls under a lot of times. There's a lot of people that just can't even survive, right? And so that's the challenge with America, is that you've got to come here and hit the ground running, because it's hard to get yourself started and it's easy to crash and burn. And I don't think, if you're working class and you live in Maine, you might know that, but if you're not, then you don't realise the challenges of coming here. Right? You really have to dig to find a foothold, and particularly if you don't come with large quantities of resources or money.
Right. Yeah, if you come with nothing, then it's going to be a lot harder to get anything at all.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the challenge. So I could get back into education in England within a couple of months when I came back. And I know I'm a Brit, but I'm just saying they had services that can do that. I don't know you can say the same thing here, right? So it's hard to step up to keep pursuing. And then you're priced out. So I can't even tell you how much my grad program cost for 2 years. Right? I'm going to be paying for that for, and I was 10 years, but really rest of your life.
The rest of your life,
yeah. Right.
That's debt you're buried in for the rest of your life.
Yeah, you're just in debt, right? So my British debt was paid for. I think it was like $5,000, and here it's like, fivefold, tenfold,
$100,000, that's cheap.
Right, exactly. It's outrageous.
Oh, you got off scot-free. Well done.
What? Oh my God, you only owe that much? Brilliant. How do you do that?
I mean, it really says something when, $20,000 in debt is considered like really good.
I
Like, you
know.
really did something well if you got away with $20K.
Yeah, exactly. You're not too far wrong either.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, like 20,000. That's my car.
Yeah, that's a car. You can buy a car.
Yeah.
You can buy a car for $10,000.
Right.
Like
yeah.
$20K will buy you like a nice car.
Right, exactly. With little trims and things.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that that's the cost of being able to succeed here. I think that's the bar here.
And you've been here for 20 years.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you think that those costs have become... I mean, it sounds like you think they've become more prohibitive, but you think it's gotten worse since you've been here?
Yeah, I think that it depends on who's running the country, and then subsequently who's running the state, and what is open for opportunities. So I started my practice on the grant, on a federal grant, all right, and this was during the Obama era. Just coming out of the housing crisis where people were losing houses left, right and centre.
Yeah.
So he was putting things in place to try and, one, stop that, and then to give people who got kicked out of work or lost everything, how can you get back in there? Mm-hmm. Working for small businesses as well, so to help you finance and have resources for that first year or so. So then when I started my practice, I thought it was brilliant. Again, I had to work, I had to do things to prove that this is what I wanted to do. There were people I needed to talk, business plans I had to create, financial exams I had to sit, and you learn. But because of that grant, it allowed me to pursue that. Mm-hmm. So I'm an educated man. So if you give me the chance, then I can educate myself to create something. So yes, it does. But then you have the present, administration on the way out, and some people are going to raise this up as well, because I was here during the LePage era.
Ah, yes.
My God, programs that were shut down. So I'm just going to get my little soapbox, but it's not just it's not just like, oh, these people from out of state are coming in. Single mothers who were in abusive relationships with their children couldn't get out unless they go to these certain centres, right? And then we're talking even in Portland, not just the one in the outskirts, but even the main place like Portland, somewhere like that. And throughout his period, when I was starting out, a lot of those places got shut down. So now there's nowhere to take a person in danger to put them in a safe place with their children so they can decide what they want to do. So that's what that means on grassroots, right? So when we hear about, oh, this money here, this money here, the point is that this is a poor state. So you need services to help people because they can't afford it themselves, right?
Right.
So when you take things away from people, it means that they don't get out, and it means that they continue to be abused or continue to not get the aid that they need and suffer. So to answer your question, I think that it has got harder. I think that money has been siphoned out of the people and channeled up. And so the last 10 years, I would say, you're finding less and less money is being ploughed back into our social system, or any system, right? Bridges, roads, any system like that, and being held by people up top. And so what I find is that trend in America will mean that there's going to be a turnover point where people are just going to die. Do you know what I mean? They're not, you know what I mean? They're just not going to be able to survive. And people, you're going to hear reports about children as well as minors being abused in certain situations. There's so many stories about Maine and cults and things. so yeah, up and down this country. So it's up the state. So that's the fear of that. You know what I mean? So has it got easier? I think it depends on the administration and what they give you. So no one's going to go to college unless you make it easy for them, or easier for them to get in, right?
Yep. Yeah.
It's little things like that. If you want to have an educated population that is self-sufficient, then you need to give them the tools.
I think the rate right now is about half, and the dropout rate is about half of that.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's something. Last I checked, it was something crazy like 50% are going, and then of those who go, another 30 to 40% are dropping out.
Right.
Like the rate of retention of people going and staying in school is just astronomically low because it's prohibitive. It's become cost prohibitive.
Right.
And without education, there just isn't a gateway out.
Right. That was this was my gateway, was education. As soon as I did my undergrad, social anthropology in Sussex University in England, it just opened doors. Right? It just opened doors for me. And I wasn't even a brilliant student. I wasn't a great, 4.0 student. I was an honorary student, but not a 4.0. So look at that. Do you know what I mean? That's the point.
And there are still I wager that there are still ways to do it in the U.S. We do still have a functional manufacturing center, though it has been depleted over the last 10 years or so. I know I have some friends who are who have gone working class, and like they'll be fine if they do that. But in the post-industrial economy, and most of the modern economies are post-industrial, that is increasingly not becoming an option. You either need to be a white-collar worker, a bureaucrat, or an educated entrepreneur.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or just an entrepreneur, full stop.
Yeah.
Most people aren't entrepreneurs. That, and especially over the last 10, 12 years since the crash, that class has disappeared.
Yeah.
And this past COVID has killed the business class.
Right.
Small businesses are dead. Across the country.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Without exception. And the ones that aren't are in states where the population is dying, so it's sort of it's a moot point.
Yeah, right.
It's like the Florida businesses are operating, but their people are dead.
Yeah,
so
right. Yeah.
That doesn't fix anything.
Right, exactly. And it's not sustainable.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. And especially for states like Florida, there's such high tourist volumes. Like our state is a high tourist state, and we had some of the tourist infrastructure this year because we managed to clean ourselves up by July, but
nothing.
It wasn't nearly what we last year. We did upwards of 5 or 6 million.
Really?
Something like that. Yeah, something crazy like that. And this year, I think we did less than 1 million.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And that is devastating to our to what is our economy.
Yeah. It says. I think about it, and it says something about sustainability. So that the idea, the ethos of American business is to have quick kind of turnover. So think of the housing market, okay? This is the Obama era or Bush #2 era housing market. And the whole point of that crash, the reasoning behind that crash, I believe fundamentally, is people flipping houses, right? Really, they'll have a house, hold it for a short amount of time, and then sell it. And this idea of just, flipping houses, and people who didn't have the financial backing were flipping houses because they were gambling, right?
Right.
Until people stopped buying houses. And so it crashed because people say, no, I'm not going to pay $1 million for that $500 house, right? And so suddenly it couldn't sustain itself, right? And so it was an empty shell. So it just collapsed in itself. So and then there's no backing, right? No support that as business people they held on to, right? So they can handle that fall.
I think we're in for another housing crisis in the next 5 years.
You think so?
I see housing prices ballooning out of control right now, and they repealed Dodd-Frank last year. That just blew past everybody. For those of you who don't know, and to be super, super basic on the explanation, but Dodd-Frank was a bill passed shortly after the recession that prevented people from doing the kind of gambling that, it specifically prevented banks from doing the kind of gambling on houses and home loans that they were doing before the crash.
And variable mortgages, that's the thing.
Yeah, they said, hey, you can't do that anymore.
Right.
That almost destroyed our economy, and they repealed that last year. And no one paid attention. Like it happened, and we all moved on.
Yeah.
I was pretty young when the first recession hit. I was aware of it peripherally, as everyone was. But it's my hindsight analysis of it is like the alarm bells are starting to go off again, just like seeing prices skyrocket. There was a house on my road that was built this year. It's a tiny little thing. It's like 1.5 stories. It's like sort of built into a hill. It's tiny.
Right.
It got sold for $400,000.
$400,000.
It's maybe the size of this space, and it was $400,000
out here.
Yeah, with like a garage, and that was worth $400K. And I saw that, and the fact that someone bought that, and I was like, oh, that's not good.
Right.
I
think you're right, and I think certain areas. So the cities are not safe, right? Open quotes, close quotes. They're not safe. People are now working from home. And so they're considering moving out to these idyllic places that are trendy and the way that you want to be if you're a middle class kind of economist living in Boston. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, wouldn't that be like, I got there for holiday, why don't we just buy a house? And so here we are in the market that just rises to that. So, excuse me. So I think you're right. In certain areas where those prices are doing that, it can't be sustainable.
It's not sustainable. You can't support an economy on some rich cats who have a job elsewhere. Right. And especially I was listening to NPR a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about the state of work from home right now and how that might actually be bad for certain white collar workers, because the reason why you have these 6-figure salaries in cities is because it costs so much to live there.
Right.
But if you're not living in a city and you're working from home, they don't have to pay you that much. Right. And oh no, you just bought a house for 6 figures, but you don't have the money to support that anymore. Right.
I see what you're saying.
There's a mass exodus going on right now from cities, and I've been following the Los Angeles one because all the celebrities post about that, but there's people are abandoning the cities en masse. Because this pandemic exposed that they're just not they're not functional anymore. And obviously I'm biased because I live in rural Maine, but I've always been very anti-city because I just don't think that people should be stacked on top of each other like that. I don't think that's a healthy way to live.
It's dynamic, but I don't think it's healthy.
Yeah, it's dynamic. I just think it's the wrong way to go about getting out there and meeting people.
Right.
It's like you can do that at the bar downtown. You don't have to live next to them, with paper thin walls.
It's throughout history, cities were about commerce and industry, some sort of way that you can do that, from trade and then safety. And so you go across Africa, and it's open countryside with these basic villages, and then you go to the city and they're packed.
Metropolises that are packed with millions of people.
Right, yeah. So it's spread out across Africa, but no, they're all coming right here, and it's work generally industrial. Back then, you can find any work and whatnot. In today's society, it's interesting because when I go back to London, I went back to London to see my family. This has got to be 2-3 years ago, pre-pandemic, of course. And I couldn't believe how packed it was. It was full when I was growing up, but there were times when there'd be space, right? Mm-hmm. Sundays, I know we did this thing of 6 days of working, and Sunday was your rest day. So shops weren't open generally, or only half day and whatnot. And now it is just packed. And I was astonished at how full it was. And I live North London, not in the centre, North London. Right? So, that's the thing. It's just they just get they become metropolises, aren't they?
Yeah, the new term is megalopolis.
Megalopolis.
Yeah, megalopolis, referring to a metropolis that has like a city center, and then the greater whatever. Like whenever you hear like the greater New York area, like that's a megalopolis.
Okay.
One of the largest megalopolises is the New York, Boston, Philadelphia megalopolis. Like it's this long stretch of just city that is it's contiguous. It goes on in either direction. I think it might actually stretch as far down as DC.
Ooh, wow!
It's been a bit since I was looking at it, but it's just.
Reminds me of Judge Dredd.
It was actually coined by the Judge Dredd comic books.
There you go.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing is that like when you're a kid and you read all these crazy sort of post-apocalyptic sci-fi stories, you're like, oh, crazy, that'll never happen, and like. Somehow we ended up in the cyberpunk future.
I know.
How did that happen?
Right.
I look outside and everyone's jacked in. Like, we're not jacked in with their brains, but almost. Give it time. Elon Musk will put microchips in our heads. But we've all got our like we've got the universe in our pocket, in our phones all the time.
I know.
And everyone's online and their lives are online and everything is done online. And now we're all living in our houses because there's a crazy plague outside and the police are super hyper militant and there's mass unrest all the time. And I'm looking around and I'm like,
my God, we're living in a mega city.
Yeah, how did we end up in Mega City 1?
Right. Exactly.
It's madness.
Yeah. I speaking on that, here's the philosophical side of RJ. So, what I recognize in being a people person is the importance of face-to-face human interaction. There is so much that goes on that is not spoken when you sit with somebody. A lot of learning, a lot of mirroring, a lot of aligning with, right? And the movement of the West into this technological era has changed that dynamics. It's starved us of that needed kind of product that we get from one another. And as a person at that age which lived in a place where computers was like, what was it that they have? The BBC Macintosh or something. It was really slow, and you had to have your TV plugged into it, and you were writing code. That was it. Green screen, the whole works, right? So that's how I started with computers. So I was fascinated by them and all that stuff. But we were very mechanical, very industrial in the way that we did things. And this revolution of digitized information, the World Wide Web. On one side, it's fantastic. We can get access to information. It's broadened our horizons. But it's bad that it's separated us, right? In my practice, what I notice the most, and I actually work at Colby now as well. So what I notice by students who are 20-something is the concept of isolation. Clients come in and there's a level of depression and anxiety, and part of that, my hypothesis, is that we're not getting affirmations from being face to face, right? If I'm doing something that's a little crazy, eventually you're going to say something or do something, which will help shape me to be more inducive to join with people, right? So if I want to be part of society, then I will change my behavior. When you're by yourself, you don't have that communication, right? And I really do think that's the movement that we're going to. And so us therapists are getting really full practices because there's isolated people that have issue with sleeping, have issue with identity. That's my thing. Wow. Identity, a sense of who they are, purpose, principles, right? These are really basic things, but people like because I have a sense of principles that I'm governed by, the way that I should live. What I'm finding is people don't even know how to formulate their own principles, right? Decorum, how to communicate with somebody to be able to get what you want in a respectful way. Right? Those are the things that we're losing, right? So what does that mean? I don't know, but it means that we're becoming much more singular, right? Much more singular.
Well, you may not know, but I do. I'll go out on a limb and I'll take that. I'll take that L. And I say what that means is that we're all going to become the Borg.
Oh, right. That's right.
But really, I mean, you know,
Yeah,
I've been rewatching the new series of Doctor Who.
Doctor Who?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Finally showing my lady Doctor Who.
That's another spin-off. We could have a conversation. I'm not a Doctor Who fan, but
you know, but you look at something like Doctor Who, which premiered in the '60s, and who are their big recurring bad guys? The Cybermen, the Daleks, the Sontarans.
Right.
Like these sort of and the Master. All these very like faceless.
Right.
Emotionless, warmongering machines. Like that's all of them. It's this, and that's true of like all of sci-fi. You can break down
Cylons,
the Cylons of Battlestar Galactica, the George Romero's zombies, frankly the aliens of War of the Worlds. This faceless monolith that's all technology and it desires things that you don't understand. Like that's. That I think is like a core fear of the human condition.
Yeah.
We're terrified of losing our sense of self, and yet that's what we're doing.
You're right.
Every day we are removing our emotions because it's easier to tweet and just to send a text and to do things over the digital space where there are no real consequences than to do them in person. And like we've been warning ourselves of this for forever. Don't lose that thing that makes you human. Don't lose that thing that makes you able to connect with people. Cut off the emotions and you cut off the very soul of personhood, and we're doing it, and I'm not even sure that we're really aware of it.
I honestly don't think that we are. I would agree with you in the sense that it seems like we are becoming disconnected from one another, and the fundamental rule of humanity of us as people is our humanity, right? And the concept of that's what makes us human. And I think that in the shadows we have, and I'm going to go there, we have capitalism, the pursuit of resources, which trumps, for a choice of a better word, humanity, right? So you can't get hospital services because you don't have insurances, right? Here's a good example, because you don't have the money to be able to pay for that thing. And people go, oh, they will take you, they will wheel you out, as soon as they do the basic care so you don't die, they will wheel you out onto the street, right? They do that in major cities anyways, right? So here we are kind of moving down that road. I think that those people, this is my hypothesis, but those people that are in control, power, politicians, demigods of wealth and richness, what they want is to subjugate people so they're automatons. And all they do is keep channeling and moving the money around and moving it up. And if we're not educated, if we're not self-aware, we're easier to control, right? And I think that's the big experiment. That's one of the big experiments going on in America, is to subjugate the people without their knowledge. So I'm going to go right out there. It's like the people who voted for Trump, right? And even within Maine, there's lots of people that did as well. We're kind of a half and half kind of state, and you can almost cut that line cut that line in half with recognizing those that have had higher education and those that don't. And it's not that we're snobby because you have higher education. It's that higher education teaches you to think, to question, critical thinking skills, right? Oh, why is that happening that way? Is there a pattern here that I notice? Wait a minute, what that person says and what they do doesn't compute. They don't match. Wait a minute, they said one thing but then they changed their mind the second time. So education allows you to follow along with that and recognize who is actually sincere and true in their words and who is not. And I think if you don't get that education, that teaching of how to do that, then you become the played, right? That's the thing. I look at this your outgoing president, and he is such a player and really bad at it. So I think to myself, can no one else see this? Like I come from the streets, man, but this player is bad. He's like, he doesn't even do it well. And so I think that's the astonishing thing about America right now, is how many people are behind him and what he's saying. And what is that? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you know what I mean? He's like, to me, he's the bottom belly of Americanism.
Worst kind of grifter, and yet.
Yeah, and so such a large portion of the country kind of supports that. So and it's not about. I don't think it's about being Republican. And some people will because of the Republican Party, but it's him. You know what I mean? That's the whole point of Trumpism.
It's cult of personality.
Right, yeah. But he's
it's infuriating.
Yeah. Well, what it tells me is where people are at in their consciousness. Right? It's hard to be self-aware, because now you can see the lines. Now you can see the slip, right? You know, your slip's showing, darling, right? Now you can see the faults in society.
Well, you know, it's I say this a lot. You can't help someone who doesn't know they need help or doesn't want help.
Right.
You people have to want help to be helped.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's a large portion of this country that either doesn't know they need help or just isn't ready for it. Right. You know, and so they will grab hold of anyone who can support their ability to continue to be unhealthy. And I really don't think the vast majority of Trump supporters are malicious. I think it's maybe a third. I think it's maybe a third is like legitimately vile and hateful.
And racist.
And but I'd say there's about a third of our side who's fucking nuts too.
Right.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
But I'd say the vast majority just are hurting and aren't aware of it or can't grapple with it. Right. And so they grab onto whoever validates their unhealthy behavior.
Right.
Yeah. You know, and that's how we devolve into this.
Right.
And along that line, I have a question from the audience. What advice would you give to someone who wants to get back into counseling but had a bad experience and it makes them nervous about wanting to go back? Like their experience with it has been bad.
Right, with a therapist, you mean?
Yeah.
Right. Good question, because that's actually quite a common question. It's the person that you're looking for, not the degree. So yes, the first piece is about they're a therapist, but you are interviewing them as well. That's that's the piece. So when you go there and you sit with somebody, you can have one session, and this is I generally do a meet and greet for the first one, and it's just talking, just seeing who we are, telling who we are, and really getting a feel to see if this is a good fit, right? You hear that word. So if you're looking to look for another therapist, maybe talk to friends that may have had therapists themselves and what their experience, so you can have multiple ideas of experiences with therapists. Have an idea of what is it that you're looking for. Right? So it could be as simple as, I'm very anxious and I need somebody to help me with that. So it could be that. So then you're looking for somebody that deals with anxiety in that sense. It might be depression, and then you recognize there are things that you need for that. But it equally can be about trying to understand who you are with a past that was not yours and was painful, right? Trauma. So that comes into your adulthood. So there's something about who I am. So when you're looking for somebody, you're looking to see if that person can handle that question, right? You don't know the answer, or you would be looking for someone. But my things are, and this is such an American way of putting this, but shop around, right? Right? Read their description. Ask if they do a first session just to see how they feel. I suggest to people, bring a friend with you, right? So if they're coming in and it's the first session, I always do a meet and greet. So it's just really about just talking, swapping ideas. Who are we? And finding out. You might want to bring a friend so that they can have a bit more of an objective opinion of the situation, whilst yours might be a lot more subjective because it's you, right? Mm-hmm. And they'll give you support as well if need be. So talk to your to the person that you're looking for, the clinician. I really advise that if you're emailing or texting, that you speak to them on the phone, because you'll get a sense of who they are by that, and see if that works for you. Right, and try. And if you have to do 3 or 4 or 5 different people before you find one, that's okay too. Right. So number 1, talk to your friends. See if anyone else has got a therapist that they liked. Male, female. What works with you best? So what are you looking for? What is it that you're presenting? What is it what help do you need? And shop around, take your time and shop around, because once you find a good one, you'll stay with them. I've had people for 3-4 years with me, right? So take your time; it's worth it.
Last little bit before we go, because believe it or not, we've done an hour.
That was really quick.
Look how time flies. But final thoughts. I'm obviously very concerned about the state of mental health in this country and the lack thereof as far as the help is concerned. Let's imagine, for the sake of this argument, that you have the power to dispense whatever kind of mental health help you want. Like, you have all the resources available to you. What is your ideal mental health system?
Oh, that's a big one, isn't it? I think that there's 2 things that a human needs. A sense of belonging. So you can put in there love, you can put in there affirmation, support, but a sense of belonging. We're animals and we like to be with other animals. So if we have a sense of that, so a center that when you step in, you are greeted. So that's the first starting of healing, I think. The second piece, to be able to... when you want to have a service that, I'm going to use my words, unconditional positive growth. People won't judge you for wanting to come in and seek help. So you come into a place with multidiscipline, so lots of different types of therapists, but the overall theme is unconditional positive regard. I will look after you and I will accept you for who you are. And the ability for the person to feel identified. So everything else, resources, you can have lots of different clinicians, some nurses in there and all that. But what I find is people want to be loved, right? If they feel loved and they feel like they have a sense of belonging, they can do magnificent things, right? And it doesn't matter what your age is, what your gender is, what your color is. It's a human pursuit, If you're given the chance to improve yourself, then people usually go for that, right? So I think the center needs to feel a particular way, so that you're willing to challenge yourself, right? And then all the resources can help you to do that.
Like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Ending on love.
Yes, exactly. There you go.
That should just about do it for this episode of Plain Talk. Remember that the White Pages podcast airs every Thursday and Sunday at 8 p.m. and Plain Talk airs every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Next week we'll have Matt back and we'll be talking about the time he went crazy and also a few interesting philosophical stories. So I hope you guys will tune in for that one. Thank you again to RJ for coming and doing this with me.
You're welcome.
You can follow us on Twitter at pages_podcast. Follow us on YouTube at The White Pages Podcast and also on Spotify at The White Pages Podcast, where we upload all of our videos after the fact. You can, of course, see us live here on Twitch at The White Pages Podcast. And we will see you guys in the next one.